Years fly by like dead leaves. Everything is darkness. Everything is silence. You stand vigilant before the sarcophagus, without thought or breath. Such is your compulsion. You do not remember your name, and still you watch. The flesh has fallen off your bones, and still you watch. And then, one day, there is light and motion, and you weigh your battle-scarred sword and raise your bent spear, lusting for the fray, eager to measure your skill against these tomb-robbing children so full of blood. You'll never be alive again. But in this moment, in the chaos between violation and destruction, you truly live, and you remember what you once were, and you taste the sun.
Arise, protect the tomb and skeletal guardians.
The flicker of orange flames begin to dance upon the stone before you. It is a sight you have not seen in ages, and stirs within you long-lost visions of the sun. How long have you been here inside the darkness? You do not remember. You only know what you must protect, which is the tomb, and by any means necessary. The rusted shirt. Describe what you look like, and what do you see in your tomb?
My frame is long and broad. There was once hard muscle there. My shirt of chainmail is worn and met with an awful orange color of age. My spear, it is near fragmentation and has seen different days. And before me, I see what was once full of sinew, but now is the open back of flesh and rotted organ. Tattoos litter that flesh, symbols, stories, a tapestry of battle, many of them, in fact, telling each one in its gory and visceral way. But it is splayed open, its arms hung out to either side. There are no bones left in that, but it is there, and it is mocking me.
Tattered cloak. Tell us, what do you look like? And what do you see in the tomb around you?
My skeletal frame is composed of ancient, weathered bones, some bearing cracks and scars of past battles, both in life and undeath. Several finger bones on my dominant hand seem to be missing. My eye sockets, though empty and lifeless, are unsettling, like a void of malevolence. Draped around my bony shoulders is a tattered, blood-red cloak. The fabric is faded and frayed, though still retains a deep, rich hue, reminiscent of dried blood. In one hand, I clutch a rusted and notched sword. The blade, though aged and worn, is still deadly when wielded by my hands. It is a relic from a bygone era, not one I can remember, but the sword is mine all the same. Along the southern wall are 7 niches, interred with whom I know not, each adorned differently, perhaps symbolizing something, but what hardly concerns me. The first covered in opulent regalia and weathered portraits, the second overflowing with gold and precious gems, the third houses blood-stained relics, cutlasses, and muskets. The fourth features distorted gilded mirrors, the fifth filled with tattered robes and an hourglass frozen in time. The sixth has silk veils and fragments of intimate poetry. And finally, the seventh has the remnants of a lavish feast, molded and rotted.
A man rounds the corner and enters your sacred chambers. His steps are measured in caution as eyes, deep brown and scrutinizing, begin to take inventory of his surroundings. He's young and fit, dressed in the tattered linens of an urchin, and without second thought given to your skeletal forms, he begins to greedily scoop piles of golden jewels from one of the 7 niches along the wall into the yawning mouth of an old feed bag. What do you do?
I step forward. With my spear in hand, I jut it forward.
He seems engrossed in his activity, the loud clanking of jewels and treasures beyond that of your bones. He doesn't hear you as you're moving closer to him.
An inherent need to protect the tomb drives me to action, as though this intruder is invading my very home.
Do you catch him with your spear, Rusted Shirt?
I hook him barely on the left side of him.
He turns and screams. He can't believe his eyes. 2 skeletons stand before him, 2 skeletons so unassuming. He sees your arm reached out with the spear. He backs up against the wall, trying to cower, trying to make himself smaller. What is this magic? What is this?
I step forward again, and I wish to loom before him and give him a moment to see what I am.
As you loom over him, you see a puddle form around his feet. He sinks against the wall, clutching his jewels. You see the question is in his eyes, was it worth it? By the gods.
I wait. I want to watch this a little bit longer.
I stab down at his foot with my sword, making sure he cannot run the fate that is awaiting him.
The cut is clean. You manage to take his foot at the ankle, and he wails and screams in response, blood pooling, mixing with the liquid already there at the floor. He's clutching his ankle. With his free hand, he's reaching up. He's trying to block from you both.
I take my foot and I press it against his chest. And I wish to push it hard against the stone. And as I do so, I rear my spear back. With both hands, it's clutched, and it feels so good. And with that, I will drive it directly into his forehead, the seat of his soul.
As you step on him, you hear the crush of his rib cage. He catches his breath and he looks up to you, and just as he does, that spear juts straight through his skull, and you feel the warm spatter of his blood burst forth and against you. Suddenly, Rusted Shirt, you're reminded of something. A memory. It's coming back to you. What is that memory?
I remember my by name. I remember the bloodied one and how I earned it on the battlefield. With this spear that I hold now in my hands, with my foot on a chest of a man just like this one, many times over. And I remember doing the same exact thing for so long and so well, and how feared I was.
Tattered Cloak, you watch those jewels he once clutched in his hands. They tumble to the floor, they scatter at your feet. This too awakens a memory inside of you. You glance to the niches on the wall, the various items that fill them. What do you see? What do you really see?
It is not so much as what I see as what I hear. It is the memories of screams that first come to me, each and every one of them scared and begging for mercy that most certainly would not come. Not to them. Lord Reginald Voss III was the first. Ego and arrogance were his downfall, though with my sword held to his chest, he was not too prideful to kneel before me, pleading for his meager life. The heart of pride would make a suitable tribute, and I could still almost feel it beating in my hand. It was ripped from his chest. Mistress Seraphina Thorne was next. Cunning and avaricious, she had looked up at me with those big crystalline eyes, lined with tears, and how I had hated it. Her greedy little eyes would serve their purpose, and I took great care in extracting them from her head, even as she clawed at me, nearly ruining the tribute with her carelessness. Captain Alistair Cade was the third, a pirate and a ruthless one who killed with no purpose other than to invoke fear and chaos. It was a waste and senseless. His tribute came in the form of his severed tongue, one he was so quick to spit vitriol with. He didn't die for quite a few hours after that, though. Bleeding out could be a slow and agonizing process, and it should be savored. Fourth came Lady Isolda Malcontent, fueled by jealousy and spite. Never had I met such an odious woman before. A gnawing need for praise could only be fulfilled if one had the ears to hear it. Her ears were a wonderful addition to the tributes, and her screams and cries were certainly music to my ears. The fifth was Brother Ignatius Alfera. His lack of passion and his apathy led him to ignore all of the wonders and pleasures the world could offer, and to do so was an affront. Slothful feet would be an appropriate tribute, though. Breaking the bones perhaps required a bit more effort than anticipated, but I was willing to put in the work. Madame Celeste Luna was the sixth, alluring and enchanting to those who lacked a higher purpose. One would think the best asset of a seductress would be her body. However, that would be wrong. The brain is the true advantage to be able to manipulate in such a way. It was a messy effort, extracting the brain through the nose, but well worth it. Lastly, Sir Roderick Gula, insatiable and indulgent. It was important for one to practice control, for without control, we are no better than animals. His stomach was difficult to get through the layers of fat, and the acrid smell of food mixed with his stomach acid nearly made me rethink this tribute. But I persisted.
Arise, protect the tomb, skeletal guardians.
Only a week has passed, and you awaken to a noise, a rattling of sorts. Yet, no light penetrates your tomb. Thankfully, you do not need light to see through the dark of this place. And as you gaze about the room, you notice movement on the stone floor. It's the body of the unfortunate grave robber, rotted and writhing. Fresh, wriggling maggots shake free of his eye sockets as a skeleton, a new skeleton, punches over his decaying form, pawing at the skin of his belly and tearing free his intestines like some sort of visceral, endless scarf gag. The hollow gaze of your empty skull rests on the abomination only a few moments before it too recognizes it is no longer alone. And you are met with two eye sockets burning with an eerie crimson glow. Jagged shards of obsidian jut from his arching spine, and its jaw begins to chatter as though it were to speak. But only the clacking of bones echo through your stone prison. What will you do, skeletons?
I rise, stalking towards the newcomer.
His eyes burn a little brighter, and he stands tall and proud before you, hands soaked in the blood of this felled enemy. He turns his head and looks to you, and for a moment you think he knows you.
I do not wish to be known, and I will swing my sword at him.
He lunges towards you, attempting to grasp onto your sword, but fails. You manage to cut off one of his skeletal hands that falls to the ground and shatters upon impact. His eyes flare with that red, and he lets out a howling screech that echoes through the tomb.
I see it in his eyes, the malevolence that I likely hold in mine. And I gesture towards the other chamber as I grab hold of him. To atone means an eternity of pleasures. Do you not want that for yourself?
At first he begins to refuse, but as you speak to him, though he seemingly cannot do the same, seems to understand you, and his eyes are drawn to the chamber its depths filling him with a sense of curiosity.
Come now. Something better awaits you through there. Something more fitting for one of your stature.
Slowly, carefully, he glides forward, led by you towards the chamber. But as he gets to the threshold, he becomes suddenly hesitant, as though he senses something.
I tilt my head. Perhaps you are too smart. I will give him a firm shove.
As you shove him, he turns and he tries to grab onto you. He only manages to grab at one of your exposed ribs, but falling backwards, he takes it along with him, tearing it from your body, a single rib, as he falls backwards and lands into the room. There's silence for a moment, and then a light. A brilliant, beautiful light, quite possibly one of the most beautiful lights you've ever seen, and it's almost blinding to you even though you do not possess eyes. It's as though you are not supposed to see this light, that you are not supposed to look upon this light. It seems to drive your fear even harder, but you can't help looking inside the room. You've wondered about this room since you've seen it. And as you watch this light, it grows in intensity and his body lifts and contorts until it's hovering bent backwards like a horseshoe. His mouth drawn open, the spines of obsidian collapsing in on themselves. And for a few moments, time does not exist, and he is trapped in the weightlessness of oblivion. Until suddenly, he bursts within that light. His bones made like dust and glitter, dancing through it as it sinks through the air and the light dims once more. You did know this man. You knew this room. Watching what just took place here, those memories seep back into you like old stories you've read. Tell us, who was he? Why did he earn this fate?
Malachi Thornfield was a young nobleman who had a penchant for sadism. He indulged in unspeakable acts of depravity and reveled in the pain and suffering of those unfortunate enough to cross his path. He is what I fear myself to be, a monster.
And why do you fear this room as you fear yourself? What does this room mean to you?
The Chamber of Atonement serves as a place of reflection and redemption. where restless spirits are meant to confront their past transgressions and seek absolution. There is a quiet calm in that chamber that only serves to unnerve me, warding me away from such a place. For there is no absolution for what I have done.
Perhaps you are not unlike Malachi. And now seeing his fate upon that room, you understand your fear, and you would do best to avoid it.
Arise and protect the tomb, skeletal guardians.
A month has passed, and you awaken to the sound of hurried footsteps as an icy wind whistles through the corridor which leads into your tomb. The flames of a torch whip wildly and lick at the ceiling as a tall man ushers in a woman, her belly swollen with child. They look starved and frightened, huddling close to one another as the man squints into the darkness beyond his torch. Outside, in the distance, you hear the hungry howls of wolves. Yet you feel your master compelling you to service. Destroy them. Protect the tomb. What do you do, skeletons?
I step forward once more, step by step, until I see in clear view the swollen belly of a woman with child. And I stay just perfectly still with my spear ready. And I watch her watch me.
I trail behind the rusted shirt, my sword held limply in my hand, scraping against the stone of the floor, almost as if a warning to the intruders.
They notice you, and they're scared. The man is going to step in front of the woman. He looks to where they just came from, but he can hear that howl of wolves. And he looks back to the both of you. He's nervous, but he's brave. Perhaps he's a little stupid. He looks to the niches on the wall and he sees a sword there, and he thinks to himself that he can just make it over there, just maybe he could protect himself from you too. And he does. He makes a mad dash for the wall, for the sword. You see him moving towards it.
I ignore him. Then I step closer to the woman still.
I will meet him at his destination, and just as he goes to grab the sword, I will thrust my own into his chest, pinning him to the wall.
Your sword moves through him like butter. The point of it perfectly situates itself between the stones and pins him there. He's gasping. There's blood pouring from his mouth. There's just a look of utter desperation on his eyes, but he doesn't look at you. He's looking to the woman who's now cowering, sliding down the wall. She doesn't know what to do. She's holding her belly. She's sobbing. He's calling her name. He's reaching towards her.
I have heard those wolves, and I see that she is hungry. And now her only source of protection is dying. I take my spear in both bony hands, and with a grip, I jet it directly into her gut as hard as I possibly can, with the intention of mercy.
There is no mercy in a blade to the stomach. She wails and rolls on the floor, blood spilling out of her easily. It's a slow death. Perhaps for the child it was mercy. The man's sobs are growing harder, so until one final gasp leaves him and his arm falls slack at his side. He's still alive, but barely.
I pull my sword from his chest and let his body slide down the wall in a heap.
As it does so, his form manages to knock the sword loose from the niche on the wall. And as he falls to the floor, so does his source of protection, landing at his side.
I will look to him, sort of twist my head, as though perhaps I feel sorry for him. And I kick the sword from his reach, and I will watch as he bleeds out.
You notice something as he's lying there. It's a locket. It slipped from one of his pockets as he fell. It's laying on the floor, it's split open. You pick it up. You see a picture inside. A woman. A young girl. It sparks another memory.
I was a little girl once. A little girl with red hair and a bright smile. That was before I had to scrape and claw my way to survival, before I knew the terrors of the world, before I found salvation in blood, before I grew to be a monster. I will let the locket fall to the ground next to his body and wonder if out there in the world there is a locket with a picture of a little red-haired girl with a bright smile.
Rusted shirt. You're standing over the woman dying. And as she's dying, gasping for her final breaths, you look upon her form, on her swollen belly, what you've done. This image evokes powerful memories of your past life. What do you see in her? Who do you see in her?
Esme's always smelled like the rain. She was beautiful, affectionate, doting, tall, but soft. She drew me in so many times for a heated exchange, or just simply an embrace, a reminder of love. My wife, my beautiful wife, her own belly swollen with a new child, perhaps a son. And I loved her. And she was a long time ago.
Arise and protect the tomb, skeletal guardians.
A year has passed, and you awaken to familiar sights and sounds. Careful footsteps against the stone floor, shadows outlined in fiery halos. Two figures, cloaked in black, slip inside. One led by a crossbow poised to strike, the other a torch and drawn blade. The archer scans the room with his weapon, pausing a few moments on each skeleton. "Make it quick," he barks to the other. "I've heard rumors of this place." What do you do, skeletons?
I will wait for the archer to move past me before lunging out at him.
The archer, he's been scanning the room. His friend has already made it to the niches on the wall. The archer passes by you, and as you lunge at him, he can feel the air. He almost anticipated your movements. He dodges out of your way and turns, greeting you with the tip of an arrow.
I will go for his legs to try to knock him prone.
As you slash at his legs, he releases the arrow nocked in his crossbow. The momentum of falling sends that arrow shooting upward, and it manages to take your bottom jaw with it, crashing through it, sending it flying through the air. You don't manage to maim him too badly, but he's bleeding on the floor and quickly scurrying back, pulling another bow from his back and quickly trying to knock it into the crossbow. His friend has turned, he's noticed, and he's rushing towards you with his drawn blade. His hands are shaky. He's dropped the torch on the floor.
As the one with the sword comes closer, I step out of the shadows and strike him through the middle.
He howls in pain. The spear, the end of that damned bent spear, rips through his middle with such force that it's poking out the other side. Peppered in blood and viscera, he instantly doubles over and begins to fall towards you, that blade clattering to the floor. The archer manages to get another bow readied.
I will lunge towards him and attempt to knock the crossbow out of his hands in one swing, and with the momentum of that swing, bring my sword back up to slice across his neck.
You're successful. The crossbow, you hear it clatter and skitter across the floor. It goes some feet away. And as he yells, as he's knocked, that blade cuts clean through his throat and silences him to a gurgle. The blood from his jugular pumping so hard it's shooting from him as he falls sideways. Failures, both of them. They did everything they needed. They read the stories, they knew the lore, they thought that they were prepared. This was going to be their big break. The only ones to ever loot this tomb successfully. Failures. Rusted shirt, you know this word well. Suddenly, you recall a very specific memory. Your name. What was your name, Rusted Skin? Shirt, sorry.
Talorc the Second, son of Talorc. That was my name.
That skin on the western wall reminds you of your own fate, your own failure.
It was the greatest failure, the ultimate one. When they came near, I was set out with my brothers in battle, but I was misguided, ill-prepared, a failure to my wife, to my brothers, to my father, to my lands and my home. As I was drawn up into the Blood Eagle. Just like that one. And I failed everyone I knew.
This failure, it's almost as though it's overtaking you to some degree. These memories are heavy. They weigh on you. And though your need to fulfill the master's service does not wane, you can feel the magic that animates your old bones give way some. Your steps feel heavier, Talaric. Your spear, you cannot lift the way you once did. As though your bones are growing tired. As though even in death and beyond, you could still be a failure.
Arise and protect the tomb, skeletal guardians.
A century has passed, and the great sarcophagus has split open. All that remains within are the tributes once left for the being inside. The tattered cloak is flooded by memories of this monumental being. Tell us, what now lies here scattered to the rats? And who was this person to you?
Within the sarcophagus lies 8 objects. A large jar with a human heart, another smaller jar with a pair of crystalline eyes, a mummified tongue, a pair of ears strung upon a strip of leather, skeletal remains of feet, the stringy remains of brain matter that seem to be fashioned into a necklace, and a jar mixed with a stomach inside. The last tribute is one of my own, the remains of my ring and index finger. As for who lies inside, he is all who was and all who will remain. He found me when life had beaten me down, when I was close to the end, and he offered me salvation and clarity. And the only thing he ever asked me to do for him was to kill in his name. A small price to pay for someone you love. He is a higher being, someone unknowable, a god in every sense of the word, and one who I willingly offered myself to. One who even now in death I commit myself to.
As your mind drifts back to the present, footsteps fill the air, and the room is suddenly bathed in an amber glow. A young woman dressed in ceremonial robes has entered the tomb. She has followed a map penned by her ancestors. She is beautiful, filled with life and determination. The tattered cloak can see a glimmer of themselves in her. But still, your master compels you. Destroy them. Protect the tomb. What will you do, skeletons?
I drag my sword once again across the stone. A warning again for those who enter, one that I perhaps hope will be heeded this time.
She notices you and she looks upon you fondly. Unlike the others, she doesn't seem afraid of you. And from her cloak, she withdraws a necklace, a string. You see upon it are numerous fingers. Fingers not unlike the one that you offered your god in tribute so many centuries ago. Mother, Father, she looks to the sarcophagus. I've brought you tribute. It's been so long. I have read so much. I have followed the lore. I have studied and I have come to bring tribute to you. Whoever is lying in this tomb, this man, this god, your directive does not change. Not for the tattered cloak, not for the rusted shirt. Still, he compels you.
I swing at her, but with the intention of missing. The final warning that she will be granted.
As you swing, she drops to her knees and falls prostrate before you. Please hear me, Father. I have come with gifts. Your blood is my blood. She tosses the string of fingers at your feet. Her head leans to the ground and she kisses the stone floor before you.
I will press the tip of my sword into her back.
She shivers as you do so, unflinching.
And I will drag it down to where I know her heart lies on the other side. And I will drive it straight through.
You hear a gasp. It's odd. It is not a gasp of pain. It almost sounds as though she gasps in pleasure. So young, so beautiful. All that life wasted. Her body still unflinching as the pool of blood grows around her. It douses your feet. It stains the sarcophagus. It creeps about her tribute. But there she remains, bent forward, kissing the stone floor.
I will bend down and pick up the tribute to place it into the sarcophagus.
Rusted Shirt, you have watched as this encounter has unfolded. There's something special about that woman. You can sense your skeletal companion's hesitation, her will to try to merely drive the intruder out and not kill her. And as you looked upon her face, you saw something in her. You saw someone in her. Someone perhaps you loved once. Tell us of this memory that now comes to you.
My brothers and I were scouting ahead in the highlands. Those knolls and mountainous areas that were often attempted to be invaded by those from offshore, those much different than us, with gods much different than ours. We were heathens, they were heathens. It didn't matter. I watched her from top of one of those knolls. I remembered the anticipation I felt between my legs at the sight of her walking with her own kind. I remember the strange look on her face, much like that girl that just died now. I remember the taste of copper in my mouth when I realized I had bit my lip so hard that blood dribbled down onto my tongue, and how I wondered so deeply what her blood tasted like. I had never seen anyone like this before. She was magnificent. I thought of my wife briefly, but the thought passed. I wanted to have her. I wanted to give myself to her. And I watched her. And when I did, I felt my own arousal peaking. It was disgusting. A foul thing, like a boy, first with puberty. But I was a grown man, and I was lustful and in love. I wanted no other. So I followed her with my brethren when we set out to defend our home. And really, I set out for her.
shadows and protect the tomb from skeletal guardians.
Centuries have passed, and the crude display of the rusted shirt's skin has crumbled and turned to dust. Only its wooden supports remain, a cruel reminder of what once was and no longer will be. Rusted shirt. Upon noticing this, that memory, looking at the dust and debris, you search for it, you reach out, but that memory is lost. Lost to the dust of time. Beyond the tomb's entrance, you hear the clattering of bones and feel the reverberations of a powerful magic that seeps into your very core. The first movement you see is from a pair of skeletal forms, not unlike your own. Their bodies jerk and tremble as they enter, a clunky animation, with swords drawn and swaying haphazardly before them. It's not until a third body enters that you feel a great swell of that power that electrifies the air around you. It's a woman, small and crooked in stature, cloaked in black velvet where long tendrils of silver hair spill from the open maw of an oversized hood. She is hideous to look upon, her skin like sallow wax that sags so that it seems to melt from her very skull. You recognize that she is the source of this great magic, as her whispers begin to flood your thoughts, a siren song in the tongues of yore. She beckons you to join. You hear the voice of your master in your head, but it's quieter this time, subdued. Destroy them. Protect the tomb. Skeletons, what do you do?
I will not fail this time. I reach back with my spear in hand and I throw it as a javelin towards this woman.
Without thought or care for its own self, one of her minions reacts instantaneously and leaps in front of that spear, taking it full on. It shoots, it catches onto its spine. The javelin falls as well as the skeleton, its spine snapping from impact. Though he still moves, he's attempting to put himself back together, feeble. The woman, the crone, she smiles. She looks at you. It was a fair attempt. I will have you, though.
I will shakily, step by step, advance. My sword above me, ready to crash down on her frame.
Her hands lift They hold out before her as though to stop you. Those whispers, that ancient tongue, they grow and swell inside your mind, and she looks upon you with pity. Oh, look at you, a broken child who has taken your jaw and your rib. You poor sweet thing. Come to me. I will be a good mother to you. I will put you back together again. Your own master sits at the back of your mind. He's so far away now. His voice, a distant echo, as the whispers begin to take over.
I look back to the sarcophagus, as though there will be some sort of divine intervention. And when none comes, I will look at the woman and drop my sword.
That's it, child. You feel the magic swell around you, and her attention turns back to the rusted shirt. And you, my child. Again, she holds her hands out. The whispers swell inside your mind, and your own master as well becomes a distant echo.
I step forward at last and follow the tattered cloak, for I am the failure.
Yes, but you will not be a failure forever. Not with me. You see her glance down to the skeleton that is trying desperately to put himself back together at her feet. The way she looks at him is with all the love in the world, and something inside of you both suddenly begins to covet that love. She kneels down and she places her old hands, thin and willowy, upon his spine, and she whispers to him. And as she whispers, his bones slowly snap and crack back into place until again he is whole. And she stands as well as him, her two minions once more flanking her sides. The whispers in your mind swell once more as she raises her hands above her head, and for a moment you can see in the space between them glints of green, a soft glow. It's as though she's lifting her head to some god that you yourself cannot see. And she speaks to him, calling out. The magic has taken over you. Old and powerful. As old as the magic that you have just been stolen from. Tattered cloak. As you awake to the mind of your Doom Master, something comes to you. A name. A pair of names. A world you left behind. What is that?
My name was Rosandra Levanter, a woman who became the victim of circumstance, of violence and indifference, who nearly lost herself to the anguish of life, who was so close to running herself through with the very blade I had held in my hands, who found her purpose in a bloodied blade and on her knees in reverence to a god whom she devoted her life to. I am the Red Death. I have brought about death and violence and ruin for so many, and I will not be forgiven. Not by myself.
Rusted shirt. You hear this name. Your minds, once connected by your old master, still hold that same connection now with your new. Does this stir something in you?
I look back to the tattered cloak, the Red Death, and I remember you. You are my folly. You are the source of it, the blighted creature that I am interred with. You took my life. You splayed me open for all to see. You were with that band, the pagans, the heathens, fighting our own band of pagans and heathens. And I followed you. And I followed you that day on the knoll. After I had left my wife and I saw your face and how badly I wanted you. And then you did this to me, my greatest rival.
I will stand before you and kneel. Perhaps as a means to ask for forgiveness from you, the only one of my victims whom I can. And I will grab at your hand and place it to my worn ribcage as though there's still a beating heart inside. I am sorry for all of the wrongs that I have done to you, for the life that I have taken, for the lives that I have ruined, the lives that I have changed forever.
You don't understand, do you? I followed you that day, not because I thought I could win against you, not because I thought I could win against your brethren, because I love you. I've always loved you all these centuries, whether I knew it or not. I came so willingly, as if it would be my last time to spill any seed. My wife was pregnant with my son. I would never see her again. I would never see any of my children again. But I would willingly sacrifice myself to your unholy God, time and time again, if it meant that I could be touched by your hands one time, whether it be in the nature of sacrifice and malignance, or that be with your hand on my skin in a way that made me shudder. The shuddering of a man who had been touched by woman before, but not like you. You are your own God to me, and for that I will forever be this paramour. Is it unrequited? Yes. Was it my downfall? Yes. But I understand now that my only failure was my infidelity to my wife, and it was worth it.
I will take your head into my skeleton hands, pressing your forehead against mine. A whisper of an apology, not for the life this time, not for the lives cut short, but for the admiration and the love that I cannot return to you, but for the respect that your companionship has kept me these last few centuries, and for all of the centuries to come.